What is up, my people? Welcome back to another episode of the Mind Over Meat podcast. Today, I have a nutritionist with us, Dr. Sapna.
It's great to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you became a vegan and what led you to become a nutritionist?
Yeah, sure. So I went vegan when I was 16, and I come from a traditional Hindu family, so my whole family is vegetarian, and I've been vegetarian all of my life. Growing up, I was always taught to respect animals and that animals have just as much of a right to live as we do. I was brought up thinking that a vegetarian diet was the most ethical choice, and I never questioned it until high school when I started joining these animal rights organizations. I think I was part of PETA, a street team for teenagers or something like that, and Humane Society. I would sign petitions on different cases of animal abuse and stuff. So I was really into it. And it was when I was working with those organizations that I started hearing about veganism and how there's so much horrific cruelty in the dairy industries and egg industries as well. So I basically went vegan overnight after that. But, you have to remember that I was a teenager and my parents lived with me. They cooked all of the meals for us. So I couldn't really commit to it until they went vegan as well. And so my dad went to a motivational talk, and a doctor was actually presenting on the health benefits of a plant-based diet or a fully vegan diet. And so he came back and his mind was changed. So we all decided to go vegan together at that point. And
so it was your dad the tipping point? Once your dad was sold on all right, plant-based diets was actually healthy for you, let's all do it, then the entire household was all right, let's go fully.
Yeah, because I was 16, I was bringing up some random diet. They'd never heard of this. They were like, what is she talking about, right? But when my dad brought it to the table and, he said that, hey, there's some merit in this, that's when we all started seriously considering it. Yeah, and now it's been 10 years. Wow. I just celebrated my 10-year vegan anniversary a couple weeks ago.
Nice. Yeah. I'm at about 10 years as well.
Oh, nice.
That's cool. So you're one of the OG vegans.
Yeah. So are you.
Yeah.
Did you do anything to celebrate?
Not really. Honestly, can't remember the day I went vegan because it wasn't one day it's boom, I'm vegan. It was trial and error for me, where it's oh shit, I didn't know that there's milk powder in here. Oh, I didn't know chips have milk in there, and it's just all these little things. So it took me a while to actually become fully vegan, just because I didn't know so many products had cruelty in it, including honey too. That was a shocker for me. What, they abuse bees and stuff too in there? What? And there's it's interesting because there's some vegans that actually consume honey, or they call themselves vegan and they consume honey, but then it was just getting introduced into the community was a bit confusing to me because there's so many different takes. But it took me a good a year and a half to really become a full throttle vegan. So for me, it wasn't overnight. Even though I was attempting to do it overnight, it was more trial and error, learning what is vegan, what isn't vegan.
Got it. And that's a more practical way to go about it, right? I think that if you go vegan overnight, it can be really overwhelming and intimidating, and it definitely was for me. But it's hard to know what the right choice is, right? I guess we each have to make that for ourselves.
Yeah. I think as long as you know the big picture idea of veganism, what you're trying to do as a whole, and you're trying to promote it, and you're trying to make a statement with your consumer choice, then you're in the right path, because then you're going to have an influence on the matrix, as I call it. You're going to have an influence on the entire industry's use of being able to push these products, because you're kind of rejecting those products and not having that demand out there. So at the end of the day, I think the big picture thing is decreasing the demand of animal products versus being the most purest, strictest vegan that doesn't even touch leather. Because you'll be much more effective if you're actually going out there and pushing the vegan message out there, and helping other people in their journeys decrease the demand. So for me, it's it's all about math. It's all about the numbers. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's all about taking those steps that kind of ensure the most effective and efficient approach that kind of benefits everyone in the long run. So basically, you were raised in a vegetarian household. household, because I was also raised in a vegetarian Hindu household, and it's always taught in Hinduism like we should respect animals and we should be vegetarians to respect animals. So I feel like you also had like a similar revelation when you kind of learned how the modern world has been constructed in such a way where being a vegetarian, you're still supporting animal cruelty. So like, how was that like revelation for you? Like, were you like motivated to expose this stuff? Were you kind of just like shocked? Were you just like, I don't believe it? What was your take on the whole concept when you actually learned about dairy is meat? Because I feel like a lot of vegetarians, for context, like can't really grasp like the two together, that the dairy industry is the meat industry. So how did you like come to that realization?
I think I was in denial about it for a while. I always thought that the dairy industry and the meat industry were separate. And it wasn't until I really did my own research, instead of having other people tell me about it or other influences, I had to go in there and do my own research. And I realized that, hey, I can't deny certain facts. For example, I didn't realize how connected the dairy and meat industries were, and that after a mother, has a baby so that she can produce milk for that baby is sent to the slaughterhouse to become veal. So the dairy and meat industries really rely on each other and support each other. So by supporting the dairy industry, I realized I was supporting the meat industry, and I never wanted to do that.
Right. Like I always tell people, veganism is the new vegetarianism, like in the modern context, because the way the industries are feeding off of each other. I know you mentioned like your dad learned about like how plant-based diets are like really good for you. So how did you get into nutrition? Was it through your dad initially that kind of sparked that like interest on like plant-based diets being like super healthy for you, as just like a plus for the ethical, stance that you were already taking?
Actually, it was because when we were going vegan, we got a lot of our friends and family to kind of criticize us and tell us about all of these misconceptions, right? We were so scared that we weren't going to get enough nutrients, that we needed to take 1 million supplements, that we're going to die of some deficiency, that I actually just started delving into the research, and I learned all about vegan nutrition to see if that's actually true, and I fell in love with it. So I actually decided to pursue it in college. But really the reason that I stuck with nutrition is because I personally and my family experienced so many amazing health benefits that are now backed up by the research, and I wanted to share that awareness with other people. So not only the health benefits, but also the environmental and ethical benefits. But definitely it was mainly health related for a long time. My dad actually had a lot of chronic conditions that he was able to reverse by following a plant-based diet. And then I also saw some benefits, right? My skin improved, which is a big thing when you're a teenager. Had so much energy. Yeah.
That's so funny, because I have a similar parallel to like how I got into like teaching about veganism, but it wasn't nutrition particularly. It was more so just me getting annoyed of people asking me questions. And I would notice that if I sent them like a link to an article, they wouldn't read it. If I sent them a documentary to watch that I watched that made me go vegan, they wouldn't watch it. But then I noticed this one interesting thing when I sent them a video of me explaining a certain aspect about, where do you get your protein from, where do you get vitamin B12 from, or why are vegans so upset about animals, then they would watch it. So it started off with just like a few videos where I made just like for fun on YouTube, that I would like kind of copy and paste the link and send it to anyone that's ever like, asked me a question about it. So I'm not answering the same question over and over again. So it's just me answering that question that I already know people are going to ask. And then it just gradually like accelerated and evolved into like my channel. So all my videos are basically like attributed to meat eaters just annoying the crap out of me. So at one point you can start to predict the questions that people are going to ask you because you get it so often. So I just didn't want to like waste a conversation 20 minutes explaining to them a certain aspect of how to get protein or vitamins, especially when you don't have any research or notes or videos to show them, versus when you have like a video. For me, I can put the research on the screen and show them exactly the credible sources, so it makes it a little bit more believable. So that's
so relatable, because that's why I started my Instagram.
Yeah, because it's all credibility bias. Like you can sit there and argue about why veganism is good or meat is bad, but like it's at the end of the day, it's just you and another person talking. But when you have actual credible sources that you can pull from immediately, like in content. In other words, it's a lot easier to convince people and I think communicate through like, using various sources and visuals and graphs and all that stuff to more, I guess, academically persuasive.
Yeah, and not as overwhelming and tiring to just answer the same questions over and over again.
Yeah, and I still do it to this day. If someone asks me, I just look at them, I'm like, I'm gonna send you a video. I'm not gonna answer your question. Just watch it and then we'll talk about it. And then they never talk about it again after that. They're like, oh shit, he's right. I'm not gonna try to interrogate him anymore. So that's cool. So you got into nutrition. Shit, what was the next topic? So speaking of like misconceptions, like what's like the most like common like nutrition misconceptions that you get?
There are a few. I think the biggest one, and I can dissect it a little bit further, is that it's such a burden to go vegan. Like I mentioned before, you have to take a bunch of different supplements and you have to become an expert cook and cook these elaborate meals and so that you get enough nutrients and protein and energy, all of that. And that's just not true. I mean, there are a few supplements you need to take, right? B12, vitamin D, maybe DHA, but you don't need to take a bunch of supplements.
And it's healthier to take like these vitamin B12, vitamin D through like a supplement than getting it through meat, right? So like even like the people that are saying that like, oh, like you need meat because of the vitamins, it's still healthier to get it through supplements, right? Than like filtering it through like a body.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the dietary guidelines for Americans, they recommend like 3 cups of dairy every day, 3 cups of milk or something like that, so you get enough vitamin D. And if you're drinking 3 cups of whole milk, that's gonna use so much saturated fat and cholesterol, and not to mention the other things that are in milk that, so yeah, taking a supplement. Take a supplement. It's not that difficult. And you can also get most of the nutrients you need just through food, right? And as dietitians, that's what we recommend, is just food first and then take the supplement.
I heard a lot of these domesticated animals, they're fed these supplements anyway. So it's like either way, we're taking a supplement, right? That's true, right?
That's true, especially because in industrial agriculture, right, cows are not eating the things that they're supposed to be eating. They're not eating grass. They're eating corn and soy and stuff. And so in that feed, they do put in DHA and
supplements.
Yeah. So we're still eating them. We just don't realize it. With cooking, you can make simple whole food plant-based meals and it doesn't take that long, especially if you meal prep or meal plan for the week ahead. For lunch, I just made a tofu scramble, right? You just crumble up some tofu and veggies and a few spices and that's it. Like it's done in 15 minutes. But I think people expect that you have to make these like fancy vegan cheese sauces and mac and cheese and like fancy vegan meats and all of that stuff. And that's just not true. And that's, I think, dissuading a lot of people from going vegan because a lot of people don't have the cooking knowledge or, those kinds of skills. I'm trying to think. There are some specific nutrients too that I hear about. I don't really get protein all that much anymore. I think protein, the people that are like, how do you get enough protein, are just using the easiest excuse in the book to try to fearmonger or like dissuade people from going vegan. But I think most people know at this point that you can get enough protein as a vegan. I've never heard of anyone dying from a protein deficiency unless they're severely malnourished, and that's usually in a third world country.
Yeah, that is true. I've never even seen a vegan in a hospital, to be honest. There's always some guy getting a heart attack or, too much processed junk food that they're eating. And I remember I read a statistic a while back where it said that like 30% of like Americans are B12 deficient, and only 6% of Americans are vegan. So it's not even a vegan issue to be B12 deficient. It's just people being malnourished and they're just scapegoating veganism as, a way to fearmonger and get people to consume. Because I think a lot of just like economics is like a fear-based campaign where as long as they keep you afraid, people will keep buying. And there's not much profit for produce and like, vegan whole foods and stuff like that, plant-based whole foods, but there's a lot of profit in like animal products. Miley Cyrus started eating fish when she went vegan. And then that guy from Game of Thrones randomly started eating fish on set because he's like, oh, I'm not getting enough energy. So is that true? Do you need fish in order to keep your energy levels up?
No. The reason that people eat fish or fish oil as a vegan or a vegetarian is because they need omega-3s, specifically DHA. And you can get DHA from the same place that fish get it, which is algae. So fish don't have they don't produce DHA either. They have to eat algae. So instead of killing the fish to get the DHA, we could just eat the algae. And there are a lot of vegan omega-3 supplements that just use algae oil. So no, you don't have to stop being vegan or vegetarian just because you need omega-3s.
Does chia seed have omega-3s too, or is algae like just the one that has the complete omega profile?
So there are plant-based foods that have ALA, which is a specific omega-3 that can be converted to EPA and DHA, which are the two like sub omega-3s, but they're not converted efficiently, which is why they still recommend that you take a specific algae supplement to get enough DHA. You can get enough ALA from flax seeds and walnuts and chia seeds and things like that. But the DHA and also to a lesser extent EPA, you do need to supplement.
Wow, interesting. Yeah. Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah, I just recently started taking blue algae just because it's blue. It just looks cool.
Blue spirulina?
Yeah, blue spirulina. It's just like I put it in my milk. I'm like, whoa, I feel like I'm drinking like some like alien milk or something.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's so many nutrients, like you were mentioning before, that non-vegetarians are also deficient in. And I think a lot of Americans don't eat fish or, other kinds of seafood very often. So they may also be deficient in DHA. Same thing with vitamin D and things like that, right? More than half of America is deficient in vitamin D. But vegans are always the ones that they, take the blame for it because we are not drinking milk.
We're the scapegoats every time. Just blame us. Blame everything on the vegans.
Yeah.
Blame your heart attacks on us too. I'm writing it on my death note. Cool. So I know we talked about some tips on like how to like cook vegan foods and like some misconceptions there. Like if you were talking to yourself as a vegetarian like 10 years ago, like what would be like the main tips you wish someone told you before you went vegan?
I have 3. The first one is, I feel like a hypocrite for saying this because I did go vegan overnight, but I would recommend not going vegan overnight. Yeah. I would recommend slowly transitioning to vegan, making one small step at a time, especially if you're going from an omnivore diet where you're eating meat and dairy and all this stuff every day. It can be really overwhelming to then all of a sudden quit. So I'd probably recommend like one small step at a time. Just, first start with eliminating beef, for example, and then when you're confident with that, then switch to cheese, then switch to yogurt, then switch to milk. And I feel like by doing that, that's a more sustainable approach. And that's a surefire way to not make as many mistakes as I did. So yeah. And I think that a lot of vegans, may criticize that if it takes you a long time to go vegan. But I don't feel like there's one, right approach. And if you look at behavior science, right, like small sustainable goals changes are much more efficient and sustainable in the long term than just doing
quick abrupt changes. Yeah. I feel like the people that say go overnight are usually the ones that like are processing the trauma. So it's like the trauma kind of propels you to like, all right, I need to change my behavior immediately, which is good. It's nothing bad. Like it's definitely good. But I feel like to conserve your mental health, it's like you also want to like commit to it, but you want to commit to it in like increments. I think what some people are afraid that's going to happen is if you just start with one thing, like giving up beef, and then you forget about the documentaries you watched, or you forget about the research you watched. But that's basically just a commitment issue where you never were committed to it. You're just going vegan at that moment because you felt like going vegan. But now, fast forward a few months later, you don't feel like it anymore because you forgot all the reasons you were starting that journey for. So yeah, I think just bouncing off that, like committing to it, and then like committing to like a schedule, like, all right, this month is it, I'm gonna do my thing, and then eventually I need to figure out an alternative, and the next month I need to figure out another alternative and get rid of something else. And phasing it out, I think, like you said, behavioral science is a much more effective, efficient way to kind of slowly progress and phase yourself out of it and into a better lifestyle.
100%.
Yeah.
And that brings me to my next tip, which would be when you remove an animal product from your diet, remember that they all are giving you certain nutrients. So make sure you replace instead of remove. I think that's another thing that a lot of vegans do. They just cut out entire food groups. They cut out beef and chicken and dairy and eggs and all of that, and they don't realize all of the nutrients they're now missing out on. So like if you remove chicken, that gives you protein and iron and zinc and B12 and stuff like that. So make sure that you're switching to some plant-based food that also gives you those same nutrients, like tofu, for example.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good tip.
Yeah.
And then what's like your final tip?
Final tip?
Haven't thought about it yet. It's like final tip. Oh shit! I did say 3. You committed to 3, Sapna.
Let me go home and do some research. I'll be right back.
All right, commercial break. She's back from home.
Probably just do your research, because when you go vegan, everyone is going to come after you and have a million questions and try to
interrogate you, scapegoat you, say that you're bad, say that you're stupid, say that you're extreme.
Exactly. So know the health aspect, the ethical, the environmental tenets, the nutritional aspect of being vegan, because they're going to come for all of it. And it'll also help, when you're a new vegan, to feel more prepared.
She's basically saying get prepared for war. When you go vegan, you're about to go to war with us against the entire matrix that wants to destroy the vegan community.
Yeah, especially if you're like a super shy, introverted person like me, and you have never, experienced this kind of like criticism or confrontation in your life. You do need to be prepared, mentally prepared.
All right, that's a good tip. Well, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. That was pretty insightful.
Of course, it was great to be here.
Oh wow, right on time. Thank you. Anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. Be sure to check out Sapna's channel. She just released a cookbook, so if you are interested in learning new recipes, you can go check that out. And I will see you guys next time, my friends. Chaos out.